Welcome to the Grit and Grow podcast, where we talk to guests who are pursuing excellence in both sport and life, who encourage and motivate us to become better mentors, coaches, parents, and athletes. My name is Shane Sowden, head men's basketball coach at Briarcrest College, and also your co-host.
And my name is Justin Simpkins, co-host and director of Prairie Hockey Academy. Welcome back to the Grit and Growth podcast, where we talk about life in the flux lane, that space between what you wore and what you're becoming. Happy Canada Day to those of you that are tuning in on our drop day today. We wanted to give you a special episode for maybe some of your travels here on the holiday weekend, but this episode is a little bit different. Today we're going to revisit some of the most powerful moments from our second season. Coaches, athletes, and changemakers who dropped wisdom that stayed with us long after we hit stop on the recording. From Beckie Scott's Olympic integrity to Levi Nelson's reinvention, these are the ideas that shaped how we coach, parent, mentor, and ultimately how we grow. Happy Canada Day to everybody. Thank you for tuning in for episode with Grit and Growth.
Yeah, Justin, it's been a lot of fun revisiting our episodes over the last number of months, and I want to start off with Brook Cups. And the quote that stood out to me was, "The scoreboard isn't the ultimate measure of success. Character is." It was his coaching North Star. And that really hit home for me as we interviewed him in the middle of my basketball season as I was coaching. And just a reminder of like what's truly important and how we measure success. And so many times we're looking at something that doesn't actually fulfill, and we're looking at the wrong thing, and we're chasing something that even when we get it, it's somewhat empty. And thinking beyond, how many games are we winning? But are we developing character? Are we modeling character? How are the highs and lows, the challenges, the wins, the losses, all those things? How are we developing that character? And sometimes we think sports is just going to automatically develop that character, but Brook brought back into focus that it's super important to be intentional about how we develop character within our programs and the student athletes where we've been empowered to lead.
Great reminder, Shane. And I remember debriefing with you about that episode too. And just, I think the challenge for both of us, and I think for you, it was even that relationship side of like how intentional Brook was to build culture with his athletes. If I recall right, he talked about when you're focusing, when it's not the scoreboard, that's not the ultimate measure of success, but the character is. He even did things like his leadership council, where he brought in another athlete with an athlete for those player development plans or those one-on-one type of meetings. So there was always that like feedback loop from your own peer. And then it wasn't in a judgment sense, but in this like, let's call each other up, let's support each other on here. And we're teammates and we want the best from each other. I think why that quote hit me so hard is because he had already detailed how for the first 9 years of his coaching, it was all about the scoreboard. And that was his success measurement. I don't know if you remember that. He said he was kind of a bonehead coach for the first 9 years, was really transactional. And then he went to an event that just absolutely transformed his strategies of coaching. And now he talked about coaching was like his mission field. He realized it was his calling. It was something he was supposed to do. And I think that's where he really was able to, in a way, kind of reinvent what success meant for him. And he's having incredible success, winning state championships and changing kids' lives and putting them on to the next level and NCAA scholarships. And so Brook, what an awesome guest he was. An incredible book as well that he's authored now.
Yeah, author, coach, mentor. And it was a great, one of the great episodes early on in the season that I like to revisit as a reminder when I need to just get locked in on what's important. Just another one that stood out to me was Beckie Scott, former Canadian Olympian. And it's not every day you get to talk to an Olympian on a podcast. And it was fantastic just sitting down with her, hearing about her journey. And in the midst of, it was a little surprising, in the midst of hearing her experiences and winning, like she won some medals and some success, that actually wasn't the thing that was most important to her. And so it was really cool to hear her perspective on what was truly important to her in that space.
Yeah. So Albertan girl, really cool. Like you said, talk to an Olympic medalist, a Canadian Olympian, a Canadian hero in so many ways. Beckie Scott, for those of you that don't recall, was a gold medalist in cross country skiing. And her quote was, "It wasn't about winning gold, it was about earning back trust." And I just remember thinking, like, what a legacy. Like, that reframed legacy for me. Like, we will sometimes think of, again, going back to Brook Cups, it's like, what does success look like? As a legacy, just that she was a gold medalist, or I think her legacy, as we know now, was fighting for that fair play, fighting for anti-doping in sport, earning back trust for the sport and the committee. Man, that was an impactful episode. And Beckie Scott is a fighter and just a proud Canadian, and somebody I think that we can. I'm thrilled to just have the opportunity to build that kind of connection with her and have her on our podcast. What do you got next, Shane? What else stood out to you?
Probably one that if I'm completely transparent, the Dr. Rob Bell episode. I had heard of Dr. Rob Bell. I'd seen him on social media, but he was a ton of fun, and just it was almost like he was just dropping soundbite after soundbite after soundbite from all the experiences, because he's worked with numerous professional athletes, teams, Division
Good.
One like
The guy's a PGA Tour caddy,
caddy.
even, right?
I know.
Yeah.
And but it was just man, he just kept dropping. I had my pen out, I was writing down quotes, and made me want to, you know, get out there, listen to some podcasts, pick up a few of his books, listen to him. And he was fantastic. But when he said, "Your kid isn't your report card,"
Oh, man, that hit
like,
you.
well, it did.
I
Like,
get. I did. Yeah, I know.
and we got a number of parents that listen. And I've coached minor sports, minor baseball, minor basketball, numerous sports at the high school level, and I haven't had to deal or work through parent relationships as much now that I'm a college basketball coach. But uh, man, if you're a parent of a young athlete, really encourage you to go back and listen to that episode, because he had just some tremendous advice and reminders for me as a dad of just understanding, like, my relationship with my kid or my sons,
Hmm.
like, their performance on the court or the field, that should have no bearing of how I love them or treat them. And they're actually not a reflection. Their sport performance is not a reflection of me. And like what's really important of like what we're developing through sport. And you know, maybe it's a bit of a hot take, but I think every single parent, in to some degree, it's a great reminder for them to just take a step back, be like, okay, where am I? Am I doing this? And where are my insecurities when it comes to that?
Sure. I mean, you've got a few boys that have been involved in sport, and I think your youngest right now is traveling around playing basketball. I think you're heading to Vegas on a basketball trip, right? So this is there. He's made some teams, and is that hitting your report card? Shane, on a real it gave you the opportunity to have that introspective look. Your kid isn't your report card. This is episode 46 with Rob Bell, mental performance coach. Like Shane said, he's worked with numerous professional athletes and a master's champion and things like that. Uh, he's authored like 8 books. Wasn't it 8 books he'd authored? I remember him talking about how he said it's the athlete's job to ride the roller coaster. Parents need to ride the merry-go-round. And that was a really cool visual for me that tied into this. Like, you don't need to ride the ups and downs with your student athlete. As a parent, you just got to stay even keel. You got to remind them that you love them, that you're there to support them, and that they're having fun. That hits me at times, and I've tried to remember this. As my kids get into sport and different things, and my daughter's playing some softball and had a couple hits the other night, and she's like, "Dad, are you so proud of me?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm always proud of you. Like, even if you just struck out tonight, it wouldn't have changed how I feel. I'm excited for you that you're excited and that you're getting some fruit from the practice you're putting in to hit the ball. It's great." But I had to be like, how do I respond in that moment, right? And getting to interview people like Rob Bell and hearing him remind me that my kid isn't my report card allows me to try and be intentional with my response with my kids. And at the same time, you want to be like, yeah, I'm so proud you hit the ball. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out,
Yeah.
I'm going through this process as a parent with young kids in sport for the first time and trying to figure out how do I support them and encourage them and not make it me.
Well, it reminded me of a conversation I've had with my own father numerous times, and it's really impacted me with my own kids. And I actually took him out for breakfast last week, and he brought it up again. He's like, Shane, I like the only things I was ever concerned about with sport, and my dad was not an athlete. um, and but after every competition in the game, because he knew I was extremely competitive and hard on myself, and he'd find me after the game, whether it's at home or in the gym or whatever, and put his arm around me, be like, "Did you do your best? And did you have fun?" And those are the only two things he was concerned about. And so that was just a great reminder. And I've used that with my own kids of like, am I celebrating those character qualities before how many points did you score or how well did you play on defense, all that kind of thing. It's more like, well, how'd you treat the refs? How'd you treat your teammates? All those sorts of things. And so, yeah, Dr. Rob Bell was just an amazing guest, which led us into just a few episodes before that, John O'Sullivan. And for
Mm.
me, Justin, that was a bucket list guest who, an author, former coach, who's really impacted me over the years with his writings. And to have him early on, especially when I joined the podcast for season 2, to have him, I don't know, it was like one of our first ones, I think our first or second one, to get a chance to sit down with him and talk for, you know, pick his brain on numerous things. But it was pretty powerful experience for me. But when he said the best coaches aren't obsessed with being right, they're obsessed with getting it right. He's like, there's a big difference between ego and impact. Like, that's one of those things where you kind of got to sit back and digest that a little bit. And where we had Dr. Rob Bell just dropping truth bombs really quickly. John was like, in some ways, a little bit deeper. And you're like, okay, this guy's been doing this for a little while and working
Hmm.
with numerous teams and just making you think about your bigger purpose and what are you really truly trying to accomplish as a coach and as a parent of young student athletes.
That was an impactful, it was a deep statement. Episode 37, like you said, it was our second episode of season 2 here so far. And um, John is a highly sought after guest and coach and speaker. Written some incredible books. Every Moment Matters is probably one of my favorite books for coaching, and just such an intentional human being. But I know he's talking about coaches. Like the best coaches aren't obsessed with being right; they're obsessed with getting it right. I mean, how does this? Like, I just think, show of hands. If you're out walking, listening to this, or driving, it's like, hey, who has been frustrated when they've been questioned about a decision? Like all of us have, and it comes down to oftentimes that is our ego, and that's again, this is that flux lane that we're talking about inside of our podcast, right? Of like remembering that, the space that we're in of, who we are or who we were and what we're becoming, the process of becoming something more. It's the reminder that, we need to be obsessed with getting things right and just not always being right, and inviting critique and inviting questions and inviting, new perspectives into our coaching or even maybe even into our parenting, right? Not even just on the coach side. So it was a good one, and it's one of those ones that probably requires some people to sit back and listen. I'd encourage anybody to go back and listen to John O'Sullivan on episode 37. He's
Well,
one of the best.
he's one of the best sought after keynote speakers, author in the world when it comes to developing culture and coaching it just in general. But what stood out for me was that whole idea of like the big difference between ego and impact. And when you read his books and you listen to him talk, it was just an example of how sport, like what we can learn and develop through sport, transcends sport. So it started off with me thinking, I was like, okay, how's my ego getting in the way of how I'm coaching my own players? But then where's my ego getting in the way with my kids, with my wife, with just my friendships, or even just with myself? Where like
Mm-hmm.
where do I need to take a step back? And like Ryan Holiday, the book Ego is the Enemy, really taking a step back and just be like, man, where am I getting in the way just because I'm unwilling? I just want to be right and I want to win the fight or whatever. Take a step back. But no, it's about getting it right. And where can I maximize impact by letting go of my ego and making it not about me? And again, so many great sound bites with John, and a fantastic episode to kick off season 2 in many ways.
I mean, staying in that same vein, right? A couple episodes, no, I guess not a couple. I think it was episode 50 with Lindsay Wilson. I mean, Lindsay's a mental performance coach. and she works with not only athletes, but she coaches a lot of mental performance coaches. And she was a WNBA player, college basketball, right? Things like this, and was a professional athlete. But she just talked about, as a coach herself, as a mental performance coach, one of the biggest things that you need to have as a coach is your own mental, like, you need to be working on your mental as well, your mental game. And so she's like, her quote was, if I'm not mentally prepared, I can't coach with clarity. And I owe it to my athletes to be prepared. And so I thought that was unique, because I feel like sometimes as coaches, we get a little hands off. We go, I'm going to hire this mental performance coach. They're going to take over my team for this hour-long session. I'm going to go catch up on admin work or something. And we forget that we need to continue to work on ourselves as well. We need to model that mode of growth with our young athletes. So that was the one that stuck out to me, I guess, is just, you need to be able to prep your own mindset before you expect them to follow. Apply that to anything. If I'm asking my team to clean up their dressing room all the time, it's like, is my space clean? Am I modeling my expectations and my values? And this is where Brook Cups was phenomenal. I mean, he talked about these value pieces and how he models it before he expects it. But Lindsay was really good. And I thought it was a great point for our coaches to pull aside of almost that whole ego piece again, and impact. Be working on yourself. Be mentally prepared before you expect your athletes to be mentally prepared. If you're losing your stuff on the sideline all the time, expect them to be doing the same thing.
Well, and Lindsay, I loved it. Was so much fun talking to her for an hour. She brought the energy. My
Oh
goodness.
yeah. Oh yeah,
And
she did.
it was
Yeah.
fantastic. And then, just checking out her website, checking out, like, she has a fantastic newsletter that you can subscribe to, and it's just filled with wisdom and practical advice how to grow in this area. But yeah, it really had me thinking about, well, how am I showing up? Like, we have to make a decision every day of how are we going to show up with our student athletes, with our kids, with our spouse, whatever it is, our workplace. And I don't think we think about that sometimes. Like,
Mm.
preparing yourself mentally, psychologically for the day. Because there's going to be challenges, there's going to be ups and downs. And she did an amazing job of just focusing us in on, quite honestly, something that kind of gets pushed to the side, especially in high performance teams. We kind of think about the mental performance aspect last. And she started to kind of bring that to the forefront and really got me thinking, especially as a college coach, what are some tools, exercises, or how can I just be more intentional about this in training camp, throughout the season, in one-on-ones, in practice, with my own players who really don't spend a whole lot of time in this area, but can make a massive difference.
What else from the season 2 here really stood out to you?
Well, that, just to stay with it into that mental performance side of things, Lisa Thomaidis, U of S women's basketball coach, uh, Team Canada women's basketball head coach, now leading the German national team.
Hmm. Yeah.
That was, for me, again, another bucket list. Uh, you know, love that episode. Really enjoyed just listening to her. 27 years at the helm at the U of S.
Yeah. Like
Been to
15 years with Team Canada. Like, I mean,
16 of the last 17 U Sport Final Eight. She's been there. The three national championships, numerous Canada West gold medals. Anyways, we could just talk about, but her her accolades. But to have somebody who's had the type of success and impact she's had, and she got pretty vulnerable with us. And in the same vein with, like, with what Lindsay was talking about, I had a lot of fun listening to Lisa explain how the difference between high performance athletes and maybe lower level is it's mental. It's not the physical. You get to a certain part where the majority of athletes are strong physically. They can play the game. But what really
right.
sets people apart is that mental side. They just think different. They see success and, for lack of a better word, failure differently. Um, and they use that to their advantage. And so it was great hearing her stories there. But um, you know, how she leads her team, how she creates culture, and then, you know, for somebody like her, like she's a I don't think she said it this way, but a bit of a control freak. Learning how to let go of control has been, and letting her, creating space for her own players to lead, has created a culture, like honestly, one of the best winning cultures in all of Canada. And
Yeah.
to hear her talk about that was fantastic.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, is she applying John O'Sullivan's quote here? Right? Like this idea of obsessed about being right, but she realized she needed to be obsessed about getting it right. So it took a loss. Right. I think her quote was, when we lost, I was angry. And then she did some self reflection and she said, but I realized that I hadn't created space for my players to lead. Took some ownership as a coach, right? So now it's like no longer ego, it's now impact. I've gone, hey, I was angry. We lost. I was angry. We shouldn't have lost, but we did. Why did we lose? I didn't do this. It wasn't, well, because my point guard didn't do what I asked them to do. She quickly went to, I got to take responsibility. I didn't prepare my players. We got to be obsessed about getting this right. And to get it right, I need to be able to empower them to lead. I need to let go of some control a little bit here. And I mean, that center on this, journey where she got to grow incredibly, like a pile, by letting go of control. And I think that's scary sometimes for leaders, right? In the sense that when you are somebody that's been put in charge of something, letting go of control can sometimes feel really scary, but it's also the only way to grow and to build up people around you, under you, empower them to take on things. It's how we grow. Lisa, as you detailed before, what has gone on since that moment. 15 of the last 16 national championships she's been at. That's, I don't know if that's, I'm not sure the record actually. That
There's
maybe
a
is
few
it.
up there, but she's in elite company. And it was also pretty funny just listening. Like, well, one, funny, but also at the same time, or amusing, but also appreciating her vulnerability of
Yeah,
just saying she doesn't like recruiting. She's an extremely high introvert. Um, and so then for her then to share her challenges with recruiting, and then her perspective on recruiting Saskatchewan girls, like the Saskatchewan ethic, farm girls, tossing bales, doing chores. And her idea of talking about, we'll develop you,
yeah,
but we're looking for those girls that are just, they want to work and grind and they're going to get there. It's like, we'll develop you, but we don't have as much time to teach that. We can teach you the game of basketball, but they're looking. And so, and again, they found a ton of diamonds in their rough that I don't think a lot of programs have looked at, and turns them into all conference, all Canadian players.
yeah.
And to me, that was fascinating, just hearing her recruiting philosophy and stories. And then quite honestly, engaging something that she's not particularly, she thinks, great at, or is really challenging for her, but she tackles it head on, and has had a ton of success with
Some
that.
big success. So episode 51 of Lisa Thomaidis. Again, another Olympian, right? Olympic coach, Team Canada, national program, Team Germany now. One of the best coaches we've had on the podcast. Hey, it's Justin here. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I'm a coach, a husband, and a father to 3 busy kids. A couple years ago, one of our daughters was really struggling with her sleep and her breathing and crowding in her mouth. At that point in time, we started looking into things that could help her. And I'm proud to say that we came across a company called SaskMyo. The team at SaskMyo was incredible with our daughter in helping us figure out a solution for her health. The team at SaskMyo made a real difference in her life, in her breathing, in the crowding in her mouth, and in her airways overall. My daughter's back to sleeping better, not grinding her teeth at night, and being able to just breathe, which goes a long way in her physical development. If you have a child that you're concerned about, whether they're snoring, mouth breathing, grinding their teeth at night, struggling with feeding, or just overall mouth development, take my advice. Reach out to saskmyo.com. Their team there will offer consultations and incredible help for you. That's saskmyo.com, saskmyo.com. Welcome back to our Canada Day special here as we recap some of our favorite highlights from season 2. I hope you're enjoying it. we were just finishing talking about Lisa Thomaidis. I'd like to revisit a couple pieces from Lisa. University of Saskatchewan Huskies women's basketball coach, Olympic coach with Team Canada, and now with Team Germany national program. Lisa not only talked about that, the humility and growth through letting go of control, but one of the pieces that really jumped out to me, and this comes where I'm used to seeing this in ice hockey, is just the competitive practices. And it might surprise some of our listeners, but Lisa was talking about she recruits athletes that expect to win. That's one of her big pieces. Shane talked before the break here on chores. She likes it when her girls have chores and they're used to working hard. But the competitive athlete side really stuck out to me because we talked about that this conflict happened in your practice, and she's like, "Oh yeah, with the best teams, conflict happens in practice." Sometimes conflict when you're a coach and it happens, there's maybe a little fight that breaks out amongst your teammates. You panicked a little bit, and she's like, "I've learned not to panic. I've learned to let the girls control it. They want to win. They're competitive. They're a team. It's part of our culture." That one really stuck out to me, Shane. I don't know about you, but I think it was an eye opener. I was like, "Hey, this happens in girls basketball as well, and that's great." And she celebrated it.
100%. And one of our core values for our program is compete. And I think almost every team, especially when you get to a certain level, is that needs to be a core value of your team. Like, we are going to compete, and not being afraid of that. And is that going to and you got to let go a little bit of control because it's going to get messy sometimes. But at the same time, there's so much value in then the team regulating that, coming together after the dispute or
Yeah.
however that happens. But like, there's this expectation that we're gonna make each other better, and that's messy sometimes. And being okay with that messiness of not being in control of all that. And yeah, that was enlightening to me because we've started to get that in our program. We had an incident that in after the season that kind of freaked me out, but it gave me a new perspective. It's like, instead of seeing it as a full on negative, seeing the positives that these guys care and they want to
Hmm.
win and they want to be the best they can be. And then it's just an opportunity to use that to help them learn and grow and process that properly. Like,
Yeah.
so no, it was a tremendous insight that quite honestly, I don't think we've talked about very much.
No, I thought it was interesting that Lisa, says she intentionally builds her practices to create that competition too.
Mhm.
So practices get intense, and that's because she's built them to be that way.
Well, practice has got to be harder than your games. If they're not, then you're not ready for game day. And that's, practices are the coach's game day.
And
So that's our role to create that. So no, it was tremendous insight from one of the best coaches in the business.
yeah, episode 51, packed full of so much good stuff. Please listen to Lisa Thomaidis if you haven't yet. Incredible episode. Let's jump to another really good coach. I believe he's an excellent coach anyway, and he's coaching some provincial football now and high school football. Angus Reid is his name. Angus Reid, episode 44 with us, an author now. He's just releasing his second coach, I think, or second book, sorry. I believe it's called Teenager. His first book was called Thank You, Coach. You might know Angus Reid, especially of those of you that follow the CFL. Angus played for the BC Lions for a number of years. He was a center, and he, as an offensive lineman, he was extremely undersized. But he went on to be an all-star for numerous years, win a Grey Cup, and now he's a guest. He's a motivational speaker, a leadership speaker, and an author and a coach. One of his quotes that jumped out to me was just about identity. We talk about identity lots on our podcast, but he just said, the thing is, if all you are is an athlete, what happens when that ends? And it was just this idea that you can't just get fully caught up in just being a football player. He talked about, and I mean, he had so many good quotes. I just think I love that he's talking about being a coach and what his actual job is, his purpose. And he's like, my job is to help you become whatever you're trying to become. I mean, he talked about Coach Dan Durazio with the BC Lions. That's who he wrote his book Thank You, Coach about. And he said when he first met Coach Dan, the first question Coach Dan asked him is, "How good do you want to be?" And when he told him he wanted to be a starter and everything like that, Dan just said, "Okay, meet you back here tomorrow at 6 a.m. and we'll get started." And they started putting in the work, right? So Angus was chocked full of energy. That episode had 20 quotes that you could pull out, and just really, really vulnerable and raw. I just love that episode with Angus.
Well, to talk to a high performing former athlete, Grey Cup champion, CFL All Star, talk about a competitor. And then to see him talk about the importance of showing up every day, overcoming obstacles, like as an undersized lineman, you look at him now, you would never thought that he was a CFL All Star.
Yeah.
But then to see him transition from, hey, do your best in that role, compete, be the best you can be, chase your dreams, and then to see his perspective transition out of professional athlete to now mentoring young men through the game of football as to what really matters and your identity, that your identity can't be wrapped up in your performance, your successes. Like you're more than that, right? And who are you becoming through sport? And like as a human, what are your values? How are you impacting others? Are you growing in integrity and character and all those things? And to hear from somebody who's just been through it
Hmm.
at so many different levels and had to overcome obstacles, self-doubt, but then at the same time tremendous belief in himself and trusting others, like to have him in the world, this voice, and then his advice to youth sport, basically coaches and parents, talking about yelling at players and stuff like that. And I think his quote
Yeah.
was,
What was
if
his
all we
quote? Yeah.
his quote was, if all we are is a coach that yells at kids because we need them to win, then we should not be in the business. And be
Full
like, yeah,
stop. Wow.
like
Yeah.
to take a step back, how are we showing? And again, this goes back to what Lindsay was talking about, mental performance. How are we wanting to show up at practice and at games for the players we are leading? And you know what? If we have a tendency to yell, you got to prepare yourself to lead differently and better before you walk into that practice. And you can do that. And how am I going to communicate more effectively? And usually, if we're having to yell at kids, and it's like we've got an identity issue. We're
Yeah.
struggling. So like it comes back to that whole idea of like as a coach, before we're trying to transform or help our players, we got to work on ourselves first.
You know what, Shane? Angus was so good on that front because I think he had an awesome message for a lot of athletes. And then he had a pretty powerful message and a pointed one in that, like, then you should not be in the business if this is you. If you can't, if you can't kind of change your perspective and have a shift. We'll talk about that shift idea a number of times. I think the one piece that really hit me is he talked about, I think it was it his university coach or maybe it was Dan Durazio, um, told him that when he was coaching football, he looked at everybody and he just pictured a sticker on their helmet, sort of like the stickers he put on a kid at a little camp, on the top of their helmet to give them their, so you remember their names. He's like, picture every kid out there with a sticker on his helmet that says, not their name, but it says, help me. I was like, what a shift in mindset. I, I've had to do that a few times. I'm coaching U11 softball, as I've probably told the listeners a number of times.
God bless you.
And it's challenging at times, right? It's challenging. They ask so many questions, and it's so it's awesome. What happens if I hit the ball, coach? Where do I run? These types of things, and it's really cool and it's innocent. And at times, I might be feeling stressed or different pieces like that, and I have to have that shift in mindset to say, what would it be like if each one of these young girls had a sticker on their front of their baseball helmet that said, "Help me"? That was it.
Mhm.
I mean, it changes my perspective, I think, and it's a shift. And so Angus Reid's episode 44, high energy. It's a fun episode to listen to. Angus is a great human being. I think a leader that's making a difference today.
Mhm. And to pivot a little bit, we had a pretty unique guest on in the middle of season 2 here, Rob Clark, social media influencer, that tall family media, and it was a lot of author, just recently released a number one bestseller on Amazon, and hearing him talking about how to use social media well for our student athletes. And I thought it was fantastic of just a quick reminder of especially as AI and social media keeps blowing up, we're leaving a blueprint. It's almost like a business card.
Mhm.
We're leaving, in some ways, recruiting videos everywhere by what we post, what we like, what we're looking at. And as for students, student athletes, a great reminder for parents and athletes coming up is like it can be such a powerful thing, and you can use it for good, but it can also consume you. And to be careful, or sorry, to be intentional about how you're using that, um, for your benefit. And again, just a pretty cool episode about taking risks, and using social media for good in a world where it can get demonized a little bit. But really
Mhm.
enjoyed that conversation with Rob.
Yeah, I agree. I think for any of our parents listening out there, and maybe you're listening, like I said, it's Canada Day weekend. Maybe you're traveling, and or Canada Day week, I should say. But if you're traveling with a young athlete or anything, that's a great episode to listen to. Rob Clark, I think he was episode 48, uh, because I think he had some really great truths for you as a parent to even share with your teenager, maybe your preteen, maybe they're getting a cell phone for the first time. You don't know how to. You're trying to figure out how to navigate this world. I think it's good. It wasn't scary. He didn't use it as scare tactics or anything. He's just like, hey, as a parent, like we're in charge. We're responsible still, for our children and what they consume on the internet. Put some parameters in place, have some boundaries, and encourage them to use it and to create a platform for themselves, but healthy, right? Be healthy in it. And so
Mhm.
he talked about some family initiatives that they do, and I thought there were some great tips that I pulled away from Rob's interview as well. And like you said, unique guest, but in the same vein of the process of who we are and where we are to who we're becoming, um, pursuit of excellence in life and in sport. It was pretty unique. Rob's story about using social media, his son getting recognized because of social media by Shaquille O'Neal, moving
Mhm.
to Atlanta to train with Shaq and Shaq's coach that trained him inside of Shaq's own personal basketball gym at his house and property. Social media can have a lot of powerful impact. And so use it
Mhm.
wisely and be intentional with it. Great episode. I think Shane, we've highlighted a lot of really cool episodes and there's a lot for our guests to listen to and jump in. I I think I'd be missing something if I didn't bring up the fact that we had the opportunity to interview you and both our producer Andy Hamilton and I in episode 39. If you want to know Shane Selden's story, this is a great episode. Episode 39, we had a lot of great feedback from it. Shane, you talked about, I think at times, feeling unworthy. And you talked about just some struggles that you had as a coach. And you had one quote that just said, if I can't perform, I'm not valuable. You talked about being an athlete and a coach, and that you just said, and that was a lie that you believed for a really long time. And that resonated for me, and I imagine a lot of our listeners. I think you talked about just being afraid of being found out, like they're going to figure out that you're not that good. This type of internal wrestle, which ties back to a lot of our mental performance, but also just to the emotional side and how are we dealing with our emotional health as coaches or as athletes. I don't know. Do you want to talk some more about that before I move on?
It was fun being in the interviewers, it was being interviewed in that seat. And something I've learned, especially over the last few years, a mentor friend of mine, JP Nurbin, said, like, just learning the power of story. And he reminded me that my story matters, and that there's a ton of people out there that are going through what I'm going through. Um, and just to be the power of being vulnerable and sharing your story. And so, things like that, talk about identity, you know, like again, like the Brook Cups thing. What's your scoreboard? How are you measuring success? How are you, where are you finding value? All those sorts of things. And I think we all can fall into that performance trap of doubting ourselves. And yeah, really enjoy that episode. Yeah, and I encourage people to, well, one, go listen to it. Two, reach out if you got questions or things that you could identify with. That's happened a few times, and it's pretty cool hearing other people reach out and ask questions. But yeah, it was a lie I believed for a while, and it's funny that once I kind of got past that a little bit through the help of mentorship and some good friends, and realigning my scoreboard and getting really clear on my values, uh, things really started to shift mentally and from a confidence standpoint. And yeah, but at the same time, going through those struggles,
Mhm.
going through those valleys has made the mountaintop a little sweeter, but then the ability to impact others just by sharing my own struggles has opened up doors to actually impact others in ways I never thought. So yeah, that episode was a lot of fun.
It was. And for those who haven't listened, my co-host Shane Selden is the superior athlete here. Star-studded, high school athlete, provincial team for basketball, national program for men's baseball, Division 1 pitcher. Shane was highly recruited and sought after, and now a conference champion in as coach of the men's basketball program. And so these stories will resonate for a lot of people, and encourage you to reach out as you listen to his episode as well. Let's go one more. I think our very first episode together, Shane, there was something that jumped out at you. Let's talk about Brock.
Yeah, Justin, I want to talk about our first episode of season 2, Brock McCormick, and a powerful line he shared because he talked about his own journey from dealing with tons of injuries as a collegiate baseball pitcher and pretty young guy who's moved into the mental performance coach arena and doing really well in that place and helping a lot of young student athletes. But he, in his own journey, talked about how he didn't believe he was a leader until someone called him one. And man, it just struck me as a coach and as a father, and even as a husband, or just in general, our words matter. And we have the ability, like we talked about Angus talking about yelling at students and all, like your athletes and those sorts of things. But man, a word of encouragement, showing belief in somebody that they're capable of more than they think they are, and that everybody can be a leader, or you see something in that kid or your own child, or even like a coworker, a family member, a best friend, whatever it is, man, our words have power and we have the ability to impact by building other people up. And no, that was just a tremendous example. Is he never saw himself as a leader until somebody called him one. And
Hmm.
who in our life, right now, I'm thinking, who in my life needs to hear that? Right? Do my kids need to hear that? Do one of my players need to hear that? And I think all of us can resonate. And if we take a few minutes to think about, we can send that text, we can send that email, we can make a call, or just do that for somebody else.
It's awesome. It's one of my favorite messages, simply because I just think the really simple definition is just a leader is someone who takes responsibility. And everybody at any age can do that with something they've been asked to do. But it's important that as a leader or as somebody maybe in charge or responsible for somebody supervising them, that we call that greatness out of them and we remind them. It's a simple act for us. So it's a great reminder. Thanks for sharing that. I think in closing, one of our most recent episode, it was two-part series, 53 and 54, was with Justin Rivas. And Justin's a good childhood friend of mine. And I'm oftentimes just amazed at some of the things that Justin's done and the challenges he's taken on. It was a cool episode about Moose Wars, about challenges, setbacks, perseverance. We got to talk about some really cool things about the Vegas Golden Knights and Justin and Greg, or Wheels, being on the Jumbotron there. And I think Justin's gone through some hardships, and he just had a quote that he's like, if I knew what I had to go through to learn the lessons I did up front, if I knew it ahead of time, I probably wouldn't have done them. But I just keep throwing myself in the deep end because I think it'll be a fun adventure. He's a sucker for punishment, maybe. But he talked lots about just how we have to go through hard things. That's where the potential is. That's where our growth is. That's where the good stuff is, or the great stuff, maybe. There's a lot of really cool things. That episode made me laugh. Uh, and at the same time, I learned a lot because it was pretty deep. Justin was vulnerable. He shared about some challenges that they've had, challenges as a family, uh, and then challenges as a professional as well, and just value-based things where he had to make a value decision to as a as a husband and a father. So episode 53 and 54, if you want some laughs, Justin's he's the host of the Z99 morning show. He's been called a comedian from Saskatchewan before. And I think at the same time, there's a lot of depth to that interview.
Yeah, a lot of people know Justin just from his on-air personality, but this episode was a lot of fun just to hear what what gives him purpose, what wakes him up in the morning, and it was a lot of fun. Just like you said, he went deep and he was vulnerable, and there were some great stories and conversations to hear, and lessons to learn from his own life. And Justin, it's been season two's been a ton of fun. I've learned a lot. It's pretty, in some ways humbling to get on the mic, to get on a call with these people, these high performers of all different walks of life, and learning from them. And it's been a ton of fun doing that. And like, we had Cynthia Monteleon on, her talking about supplementation and diet and treating your body right. That was a great episode.
Sleep was a big one.
Sleep was important, right? Like hearing, like, and again, author of Fast Over 40, senior Olympic competitor still at like 46 years old, and winning medals. Levi Nelson talking about purpose and coaching. Like, our guests have been phenomenal, and it's been a ton of fun just hearing and learning from them, because I thought I was just getting into this to be a podcast host, but it's actually helping me be a better coach and a better father and husband, with some great reminders every week or two. So yeah, thank you, and it's been good.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I mean, listen, it's Canada Day week, and Bernie Stone, we called her, Canada's greatest hockey mom, mom of Shane Doan. She had an awesome 2-part series that was just for all us as parents and for moms, just her heart just poured out. Really cool. Go back and listen to that. I want to say episode 42, but in conclusion, thank you so much for joining and listening today. We've learned so much from our guests this season, and we hope that you have too. I just asked, maybe chime in on our socials to provide any feedback that you have. We really do welcome feedback, as well as even just, we want to hear from you. Like, what are some suggestions of what you're enjoying, or topics you'd like us to tackle, or even guests that you'd like us to interview? Please let us know. Reach out, leave a comment on our social, or leave a comment even on the Spotify or the Apple iTunes podcast. We'd love to hear from you and get back to you. As always, please follow the podcast, share it with a friend. Like it. That always helps us get the news out to more people. Happy Canada Day week, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Grit and Growth podcast. We hope that you enjoyed today's guest and the answers that they were able to give and the stories they were able to tell. If you did enjoy today's episode, we'd ask that you would just follow or subscribe to our podcast. It does help us get the word out and our message. Thanks again. Have a great day.